Hiya two children, it's Mr Yeardsley. We just started David Walliams' new book, Slime. Do you remember? I haven't even got to chapter 1. We were introduced to the characters, Ned and Jemima, his sister, and all the different people who live on the island of Mulch. And we had a little look at a picture. And then, last of all, we met slime, didn't we? We had a brief history of slime. We read that bit too. Let's get to chapter 1. Chapter 1, Mulch. The little Isle of Mulch was home to less than 1,000 people. 999 to be precise. I told you it was less than 1,000. One of these 999 people was a boy named Ned. Ned wasn't short for anything. He was just called Ned. Ned was 11 years old. He'd been born on Mulch and, like most islanders, had never left. To say Ned was just an ordinary boy would be wrong. He wasn't ordinary, he was extraordinary. Ned had been born with legs that didn't work. He couldn't walk at all, so was found a battered old rusty wheelchair and he learnt to use it. The boy could often be seen whizzing around the island, doing stunts and wheelies to the delight of his friends. "I got the zoomies!" he would cry as he whizzed past. Home for Ned was a tiny, weather-beaten old cottage. The cottage perched on the edge of a cliff overlooking the raging sea that surrounded the island. From dawn till dusk, Ned's mother and father were out of the house at work. Dad was a fisherman, so was away at sea all day on his fishing boat. Mum sold the fish Dad caught at the island market. The only fish you could catch around the Isle of Mulch were called shoe fish. They were fish shaped like shoes. They tasted like shoes too. The overriding flavour was foot sweat. But the locals became used to the taste, disgusting though it was. They had no choice. Needless to say, both Ned's parents absolutely stank of fish. But Ned didn't see or even smell much of them, as the pair were always working. Instead, the boy was left home alone with his older sister. Jemima resented Ned deeply. She might have been the older one, but it was her younger brother who got all the attention. The girl wore pretty little flowery dresses with huge steel-capped boots, and she wasn't afraid to use them. Ned's aunt owned the Isle of Mulch. She was his mother's much older sister, and her name was Greta Greed. High on a hill overlooking the whole island squatted Kitty Litter Castle, a huge medieval fortress that the lady called home. It was a world away from the tiny cottages that Ned shared with his family. Greed lived there alone, which is how she liked it. Her only company was her 101 cats. See them all on the page. These cats were fearsome beasts. She had them to scare nasty little children away. The lady loathed children, especially her poor nephew Ned. Aunt Greta never, ever did a thing to help him. For her, children ruined her Isle of Mulch with their games, their chatter, and worst of all, their stench. Aunt Greta should be the last person to complain about a smell, as she stank of cat pee. Because Aunt Greta owned the entire island, she had power over all those who lived there. The lady rewarded those grown-ups on Mulch who detested children almost as much as she did. One such man was Sir Walter Rath. He was a nasty old wretch whom Greta had made headmaster of the only school on the island, Mulch School for Revolting Children. The only thing that gave Rath pleasure was expelling children from his school. Like so many others, Ned had suffered that fate. There was one toy shop on the island. Greed had given care of it to twin brothers Edmund and Edmond Envy. Had the names, the shop, Envy's Emporium, but it was nothing more than a front for terrorising children. Ned had had a particularly nasty time when he'd last visited. Another resident of Mulch was Madame Silenzio Sloth. The lady was supposed to be a piano teacher, but she was too lazy to teach children anything. Sloth was a virtuoso of cruelty. Ned had had the misfortune of being one of her pupils, and when he dared to complain, all hell broke loose. Captain Pride was an uptight ex-soldier whom Greta had appointed Mulch's park keeper. The captain ensured no one could ever enjoy the island's only public park, especially not little people like Ned. So we got Sir Walter Rath in the school, Envy's Emporium. We've got Salenzo Sloth House, piano teacher, and Captain Pride, the park keeper. Ice cream sellers Glenn and Glenda Glutton made sure children never got to enjoy an ice cream, ever. The married couple zoomed around the island in their van looking for children to rob. They took their pocket money and then sped off without giving them their ice cream. If the Gluttons had lived anywhere else in the world other than Mulch, they would have been locked up in prison and the key thrown away. However, greed delighted in their scam and ensured the pair were never brought to justice, even when they stole from her own nephew, Ned. So, this little island was home to a large number of horrible grown-ups. But there was a child on the island who was probably as bad. Poor Ned was related to her. It was his sister. There's the Glutton's ice cream van. Chapter 2. A Beastly Girl. Ned's sister Jemima liked nothing more than playing horrid tricks on her little brother. Tricks that made the girl snigger to herself all day and night. It wasn't a nice snigger, it was a nasty snigger. And if she knew, she was beastly. The tricks were all absolutely foul. Dropping wriggly-raggly worms down the back of her little brother's pyjamas. Yikes! Replacing Ned's toothpaste with glue so his teeth stuck together. Emptying the jar of his favourite marmalade and replacing it with mashed up wasps. Yuck! Painting everything in her little brother's room bright purple. The walls, the floor, the ceilings, his toys, his clothes, even his pet gerbil. No! Hiding a big furry spider at the end of his bed so it nibbled his toes. Ah! Yow! She's doing all those beastly things. Dusting the toilet seat with chili powder so the boy's body was too hot. Swapping Ned's favourite chocolate-coated raisins with gerbil droppings. Ugh. Breaking wind in an old wooden box for a week, then opening it in Ned's bedroom so he would suffer the pongsnagora. Pooh! However, all this was nothing compared to the nightmarish trick Jemima was planning for her little brother. Chapter 3. Gunk. Jemima was a child who revelled in all things yucky. Not just spiders and worms, but gooey things too. All around the little cottage where the family lived, the girl had hidden gunk in jars. Things you found under rocks, things you found at the bottom of ponds, things you found lurking down the plug hole. Jemima would scoop up anything nasty and deposit it in a jar. Over time, she'd collected hundreds and hundreds of jars of all different kinds of gunk. Every single one had a label on it so Jemima could remember what was what. One shudders to think how the girl collected some of these revolting things. You would not want to touch this stuff with your bare hands. There's some jars there. We've got badger snot, frog spawn, granny dribble, snail trail jellyfish, foot cheese, old man's phlegm, earwax, belly button fluff. Have a look. See which ones you can read. At the bottom of every wardrobe, at the back of every cupboard, under the floorboards, there were jars and jars and more jars. Jemima was stockpiling them in the family cottage as she wanted to play the most humongous trick on her little brother. A trick that would make him scream the house down. Ah! A scream that would echo all over the Isle of Mulch forever. Jemima would snigger herself to sleep thinking about her devilish plan. There was just one problem. Her little brother was onto her. Chapter 4. Bogies under the bed. Ned found the jars, just one jar at first, in a deep sleep. Ned had rolled off his bed in the dead of night, and thud! Ouch! The fall woke him up. Just as he was about to haul himself back up, Ned noticed something glinting in the darkness under his bed. Some jars. He reached out and found it was a jar. The label, in his sister's scrawled handwriting, simply read, "Bogies." On closer inspection, he discovered it really was a jar bursting with bogies. They looked very much like Jemima's. She had picked, licked and flicked so many at Ned over the years that he could recognise them in any line-up in an instant. Hers were always a brownish shade of green. At once, Ned knew his wicked sister was up to something. But why had she hidden her own bogies in a jar under his bed? Lifting up the sheets, he saw that this was just one of what must have been 100 jars under there, each containing something more disgusting than the last. Ned's eyes bulged as he read the labels. Ground ants, boiled dandruff, sludge found down the plug hole after a bath, something even more unspeakable than the other unspeakable thing that cannot ever be named. Read some more to yourself. One by one, Ned pulled all the jars out from under his bed. He was careful not to clink them together. The sound would wake up his wicked sister, who was sleeping in her room next door. Then Ned hoisted himself up onto his battered old wheelchair so he could go hunting for more jars. One good thing about getting around on wheels is that you can glide silently and undetected. As long as you don't bump into the furniture, donk, or run over a cat. Meow! Ned rolled past his sister's bedroom and headed into the living room. Now, thought Ned, where would be good hiding places? It turned out everywhere. There were jars, and more jars of yuck-tastic stuff hidden all over the room. Behind the curtains, under the sofa, on top of the bookshelf, inside the cupboard, under the cushions, behind the plant pot, inside the lampshade, under the coffee table. The same was true of the kitchen and the hallway. Rolling past the boiler cupboard, Ned heard gurgling. Gurgle, furgle, durgle. On opening the door, he could see jars and jars with gunk oozing out of them. The heat from the boiler must have made the gunk expand. It was a wonder that one of the jars hadn't exploded. Once again, all the jars were labelled, each full of something more puzzling than the last. What was all this stuff? Plume, grunge, spludge, foogle, wicky-a-dink, muppety funk, hunk, woolly bumps, noodle, boo-boo, piffle, paffle, bamble-boozle, and more importantly, what was she planning on doing with it? The boy approached his mother and father's room. He peeked through the gap in the door. Their bed was empty. It was the early hours of the morning and the pair were already at work. No doubt Dad was heading out to sea and Mum was setting up her market stall. A quick search by Ned of the back of their wardrobe revealed jars, and more jars. Curiouser and curiouser, he muttered to himself. Then the boy rolled back into the hall, making his way towards his dreaded sister's bedroom. Trundle, trundle, trundle. Ned was sure somewhere in there would be the answer. He put his ear against the door. Zzz, zzz, zzz. So Jemima was fast asleep, snoring like a steam train. The sign on her bedroom door read, "Entry strictly forbidden. Any unauthorised persons who go beyond this point will get a boot up the bottom." Now was Ned's chance. The boy took a deep breath. Then as quietly as he could, he opened the door. Click. And then gently rolled himself inside. Trundle. The boy hadn't been allowed in his sister's bedroom for years. No wonder she kept everyone out. Her room was full to busting with jars and more jars of gunk. There must have been thousands upon thousands of jars in there, all the way from the floor to the ceiling. There they are. No wonder Jemima had resorted to hiding the jars all over the house. There was no more room in her room. It was a miracle she could even get in or out. As Ned watched his sister sleep, noting that she wore her steel-capped boots in bed, he scanned her bedroom for clues. There must be an answer somewhere to what she planned to do with all these jars of gunk. In a corner of the room were Jemima's school exercise books. Ned knew that his sister never did a scrap of work at school, so was surprised to see how well thumbed the books looked. Upon opening them, Ned discovered that they weren't full of schoolwork at all. Oh no. They were full of plans for the diabolical trick she was about to play on him. Wonder what she's going to do with all that slime and all that gunk. Have you got any ideas how we're going to meet slime, I wonder? Guys, I look forward to reading that next few chapters to you next time. In the meantime, don't forget the school motto. If you see someone without a smile, give them one of yours and keep on smiling, everyone.